Welcome to Good Humans Podcast. Sam Corlett, how you going, brother?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mate, it's really nice to have a chat. I got hit up by your management or PR about a month ago, I think now, and they said like, hey, would you love to catch up with Sam Corlett, Aussie actor, and put out all of your things that you've been on? I was like, I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't know who you were. And then I looked through it, and then I've just started binge watching a bunch of your shows from Vikings, Valhalla, which is one of Netflix's biggest shows ever. You're the lead actor, and I binged it yesterday. And not only are you like the lead actor, the show is basically around your character, which is just so cool, man. And you absolutely kill it in that. But we're going to go through a bit of a chronological of your life. I love hearing of young Aussies, making it in the big wide world out there. And you've done it with such grace and, by staying true to yourself, it seems like, through listening to a few of your other interviews. So we're going to go on a bit of a journey through your life and, get to know Sam Corlett. So the first question I always open with.
I was going to say, I've listened to I listened to Tom Carroll's with you and I listened to yours, and I'm so grateful to be here, and I really love what you put out in the world. It's really, really special what you're doing, and especially for Australians, and especially like being an example of Australian masculinity. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thanks, brother. I appreciate that. How good's that Tom Carroll episode? Isn't it fascinating hearing about his story with like Nelson Mandela and stuff?
Amazing.
Yeah, unbelievable. And meditation, I know, is big for you too. So the way that he views meditation, and I don't know if you've read his book, it's fascinating. Like, basically saved his life. Like, he was like full like junkie basically in the middle of his career. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Absolutely fascinating. We'll jump into the chronological. I'm sure we'll circle back to meditation and all that. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, the first question I always open with is the same for everyone. So what are you grateful for today, right now in life?
I'm grateful for, I had a beautiful screening of a film that's about to come out on the 17th of October called He Ain't Heavy. And we had the screening 2 nights ago at Avoca Beach Cinema. And I had my family friends there. I had mates that I played cricket with, that I played basketball with, that I've like people that have known me my whole life, all filling out Avoca Beach Cinema. And the film is a brother-sister relationship, and the brother ends up going down the rabbit hole of methamphetamine and ends up on the streets. And to a certain degree, it mirrors my mum's relationship with my uncle. And my uncle's ashes were actually spread just next to the cinema. So to have that kind of full circle moment of being able to honour my family through this story and be able to have that screening with all the people that were so important to me, I'm still, reflecting on it. Like I'm still trying to be in that moment, even though it was 2 nights ago. Like, I'm trying to soak up as much of that experience as possible because it was so significant.
Mate, thank you for sharing that. It's so nice. I can imagine to come back to your hometown and get to do a premiere, like you said, with people who have known you for your whole life, as much as so many people, as your career's grown on mega Netflix shows, would know you as Sam the actor. For your friends and family to get to see, chasing your dreams and crushing it must be really special. Where can people watch He Ain't Heavy? Because this podcast would have come out on the 19th, the Friday, or 18th, the Friday. So it would have come out yesterday. So where can people watch it?
It'll be in select cinemas around Australia in all the major cities. It's a lot more of an independent film, cool. But it's garnered a lot of like great reception already, which has been incredible. Like, from some of the outlets saying it's the best WA film ever made. It was someone said it was the Australian Film of the Year already, which was pretty incredible.
Wow. Well, congratulations, mate. Everyone listening, make sure you go find a cinema where you can watch it. I'll definitely be checking it out the next week once I finish binge watching all of Vikings. But mate, let's get to know your story. As I said, I feel like we're going to have plenty of similarities in our journey. You said you listened to my episode 100 of Good Humans podcast, where you would have learned all about my journey, and I took the surfing route, and you said you took a different route. But I want to get to know a bit more of your childhood before you got to that teenage years. So remind me back, what was life like as a kid? Where'd you grow up? What was your family dynamic like? Brothers, sisters? Give me a bit of an update up until you're about go to high school.
Yeah, I was pretty blessed. My dad is a carpenter, business owner, and I grew up working for him and bits and pieces here and there. But he built our home just as I was born, and my mum was like a stay-at-home, and it was and managed his business. But yeah, I've got an older brother, younger sister. We're in a valley about 5 minutes from Wamberal and Terrigal and Avoca Beach, called Matcham, and it was really special, and knowing that, you know, Dad, you know, was able to put his craft to use and build our home. It always felt like I've always felt held there. And Mum had the travel bug, and so she would try to take us all over the world as much as possible. A lot of around Southeast Asia, visiting a lot of spiritual sites. She never really wanted us to just do the resort route. She'd take us to places that were like really of the culture and of the place. And so, like for instance, like when we went to Thailand, we went to Chiang Mai and stayed in temples where we were the only foreigners. And just like I remember one morning waking up and we were riding our bikes through rice paddy fields, and like it was so foggy, and then 80 monks in their orange robes came out of the fog, and we just got exposed to so much culture so early. And then and then there was a few instances that happened as I got older where my mum had a few health problems. So she had thyroid cancer, and then a couple of years later breast cancer, and then a couple of years later bowel cancer. And along with those kind of journeys became like paralleled our more conscious health decisions or meditation decisions and stuff like that. And so, and also kind of, you know, when death's at your doorstep, you have that realization of what you want to do with your life. And so she was very encouraging of like going for what we loved, and would try to gift us as much opportunity as possible and push us to do it.
That's so beautiful, man. How old were you when your mum was first diagnosed with cancer? Because I think it'll set a bit of context for understanding, like back to back to back cancer is just like, well, someone going through cancer once and surviving is like amazing. To go through it 3 times must have been so tough on yourself and the family, but also bring a lot of perspective. You know, the little dramas that happen at school would seem pretty insignificant when you go home and, you know, you're cuddling your mum before you go to school who's, battling cancer. So how old were you when you first, when your mum was first diagnosed?
It was year 6, so 11 or 12. Yeah. And then the breast cancer was more of the full 9 yards, and that happened when I was 15 or 16. And then the bowel was when I was like 21. But all these things, like, I don't think we ever like thought that she was not gonna make it. Like we knew she was gonna make it. Like it was just us banding together, and if anything, it brought the family closer together. And we were a pretty tight unit already, but like we just became even closer because of that. And the second time around, she got diagnosed just before I went on exchange to America, and I went over to incredible like sports school where I got to play American football, basketball, and had one of the best experiences of my life.
Where'd you go?
At the same time, I went to a place called Episcopal Academy in Philly, hence the hat. And it was actually right down the road from where Kobe Bryant went to school, and we had like one of the basketball coaches coached him, and it was really awesome. But yeah, I would Skype most nights with my mum, and she'd be losing her hair, and then Dad shaved his head and Mum shaved her head, and then I came back from that experience, and it really she went from one chemo to another chemo, and during that change, the second rounds really affected her, and affected me to watch her go through that and see my brother and my dad carrying her to the bathroom, to the shower, and definitely felt a little bit of guilt for not being there, though she was so encouraging of me to be like, what are you going to do when you hear, like, go. But
Thank you for sharing that, man. It must have been so tough, and thanks for sharing the guilt that you must have felt, because I'm sure there's someone sitting out there right now that is going through something similar. You know, somebody in their family is struggling, and because of the journey they're on, the chapter in life they're on, they can't be there, and it can be so hard. And like, you know, sometimes we can't drop everything. And as you said, it sounds like your mum really instilled in you from a young age, and through her, you know, journey with, you know, cancer, it allowed you to chase your dreams. It allowed you to realize, you know, life isn't permanent. Life is about, you know, squeezing every bit of juice out of it. So, yeah, as I said, I think there'll be someone out there listening right now who might be feeling exactly the way that you just explained you did, with a bit of guilt, but also feel a bit of solace that, you know what, like, people get through cancer, people can, you know, survive, and we're all on that chapter and that journey that we're on. So thanks for sharing that. What was your high school experience like? That sounds quite fascinating, going over to America on exchange. Tell me about your high school experience. What was what were you into in high school?
Well, listening to your episode 100, like, school was like, I tried to get involved in everything. You know, I loved the sport, especially. Absolutely.
Were you a drama student?
I did do drama, but I mainly did drama because I used to be, I was captain of rugby and basketball, and I used to have to give the speeches at assembly. And I used to get so like shaky in my voice. I used to get nervous, like the sweaty palms, the whole Eminem song, knees weak, the whole lot. And, yeah, that's it. And then my mum said, well, if you want to overcome that fear, like, get in front of people more often and try out drama, because like whatever you're going to do in life, that's going to be an asset. And that's
breaking a big stereotype too. The captain of the footy team and basketball team signing out for drama.
Yeah. Well, I still cop a bit of shit for it, for sure.
Hey, look at you now, just like this, everyone.
Well, everyone's super supportive now, but like, you know, I think, when you are breaking the stereotype, initially it's a little bit, it can challenge people's opinions, but it was, and then through that, actually, like the idea of like receiving a script, like I liked, you know, there was obviously the comedic things, making people laugh. That was really beautiful. But then what I didn't know that I had was something to offer the more dramatic scenes. And like, I remember getting a monologue from a play called Black Rock, which kind of talked about growing up in Newcastle, a bunch of surf rats, and shit hits the fan. And I was like, well, I know this guy, and it was an emotional scene, and I knew I had access to those things, and I felt like I was able to honor, you know, the reality of someone's life by active empathy, like embodying empathy and expressing what they, and being a conduit for them, and that felt. I remember doing it, and a couple of people in the class being like quite moved by it, and I was like, oh shit, like that felt pretty significant. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really cool reflection. And from a young age, you know, I guess a lot of aspiring actors like, I want to go work in Hollywood, I want to play these characters, but the way you just explained it, it sounds like you wanted to be these characters so you could empathize with the life and the character that they are, but also maybe learn from it into your own life and feel more empathy for others because of your ability to, you know, go deep into their story, learn about it, try and be that character. It's very not at all the same, but I feel through having interviewed 180 people over the past 4 years, once you start to like really learn about people's journeys and understand them at like a, you know, not as deep as you're going with characters, but, you know, when you speak to someone for 45 minutes to an hour and a half, you kind of get to understand how different we all are, but also how similar we all are. It's it's just really nice the way you reflect on that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like what's been beautiful about this film, He Ain't Heavy, is I play a guy who struggles with meth addiction, and but really it's just a lad that got dealt a different hand to me, and and like he's no different to me except he went down a different avenue or like, you know, copped some pretty hectic childhood trauma and tried to overcome that by taking this substance that automatically felt like made him feel like resolved and whole again. And so like you can't really blame someone for going for that, but it's obviously not a sustainable route. And but I definitely developed a lot of compassion for those who are just attempting to be who they once were before shit hit the fan. You know,
I love it. I love that you bring that up. My last week's episode from when this came out, I had this guy Ben Low on who, was a meth addict, was dealing meth, was doing all this gnarly stuff. But once again, by having this long conversation with him and hearing about his upbringing, where his mum and dad broke up when he was like 13 years old, and his dad left, and he felt like that meant his dad didn't love him. So having this kind of and then that set him on this destructive path. Whereas so often we see kids on the news, being, youth crime and all this stuff. And I just see so many comment section going like, throw them away, lock up the key, without going like, I wonder what they're going through. Like, instead of getting furious at them, trying to get curious. Like, I wonder what you're going through. And it's like, you take back control, and empathy is like such a powerful, like it's a superpower once you can actually, really lean into it.
Yeah, and I like my director David Vincent Smith. It's based on his relationship with his brother, and he was saying like, look, unless you're curing or healing the root cause, chucking people in prison, you're just encouraging a repeat offender.
Yeah,
you're not actually like, and the thing with the film is like it's not an answer to anything. It's just an arm around people who've been through that experience, because like, how can you put a finger on exactly what should be done? But really, like, going to the core mission of your podcast, like how can we heal the root cause? How can we take care of the soul of a person? And like, they didn't choose the family that they were born into. That's just a matter of circumstances. So yeah. Yeah,
and just like a bit of empathy goes a long way. I'll just quickly reference one more time that Ben guy from last week's episode. He had like a job at a gym, and he'd been just judged by everyone so often with his like addictions and this and that, and then he got charged again with a offence like a few years back. And instead of the job that he had being like, you're going, mate, fired, he just said like, mate, like, what's going on? How can I help you through this? And he was like, that was the thing that changed my path. Just one person. Instead of judging, having empathy, and there's just so much power in that.
So much, yeah. And when it comes to each of the characters that I play, I attempt to really drop into what their childhood would have been, what their dreams were, what stopped them, what their fears are, and yeah,
it's so cool. Let's I want to talk about, I know throughout your teen years, when your mum was going through her, cancer challenges, I think you mentioned briefly that she was quite holistic, but I also know the secret and manifestation came into it, because I want to hear your experience with that, and then I want to tell you a cool story about Evoker and the secret.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, I think, she was, I think Mum had a fair bit in her life that she was attempting to heal, or rather like give us a blank slate, that in attempting to like hide it from us, sometimes it would be in her, and she'd hold it in and it would come out in different ways, which is, some people say is like cancer is psychosomatic pain, held tension being expressed. But yeah, she found a lot of solace in a lot of holistic approaches, whether we had Reiki people coming through the house, and the book The Secret, like I remember we used to come in and cuddle her in the morning, and she'd open the curtains and go, I'm happy and healthy and blithely alive. And that became like the mantra. And she gave me the teenage version of The Secret. And I remember like reading it when I was, in my bed at school, in my bed at like 14, maybe even earlier actually. She also gave us like a little box that had a flower on it. And it was like a prayer box that she gave us when we would have been like, so young, and it was like you write prayers and put it in the box, and things may come to fruition. I also remember asking her when I was like, one of my earliest memories saying like, asking about God, and we're not necessarily a religious indoctrinated household, but she was like, God is everywhere, but God is also in you. And I used to feel like the sense of that kind of stuff. But the secret was I really loved it, and I like I remember I started like a little locked folder of photos in my phone of different ideas of the future that I might want to welcome into my life, and hearing stories of like Jim Carrey, you know, talking about like his wanting a bicycle, and repeating the rosary, and somehow his mate. This was written in the teenage version of the book. Somehow his mate, you know, put his name in a lottery for a bike, and then a bike showed up. You know, all these different divine synchronicities, and yeah, I remember putting in a few different things, and sure enough, they'll come to fruition. And one of them actually was going to the exact school I went to on exchange. And when that came to be, it was like one of the most exciting moments, because I so wanted to go to this school. And then, yeah, it kind of, I suppose it planted a bit of a chip in me of like, you know, with the clarity of vision, you know, it's a lot easier.
You believe you can achieve.
Yeah, and it's also just like a lot easier to walk toward, make the right choices on a daily basis when you have a clear place of where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. It's The Secret came into my life. I remember it so clearly. I was in Acapulco in Mexico for a surf comp.
Sick.
And I'd just gone through a pretty shitty relationship breakup, and I was in a pretty bad way, and I was there for a surf comp. And I'll tell you why I wanted to bring this up, because I was there with my friend Wade Carmichael, who's also from Avoca, where you're from, the Central Coast. And he and my sister's like, you got to watch this Secret. Maybe it'll help you out. It might change your mood a bit. I was pretty down. And I watched the doco of it. And for anyone who hasn't heard of The Secret, it's basically about manifestation, the idea that, you know, what we can attract into our life based on the power of manifestation, in a very short one-sentence answer. But so we watched this movie, and I was like, all right, sweet, I'm going to start manifesting. I'm going to win this comp this week. I'm going to blah, blah. And Wade isn't the most spiritual guy. He'll let you know that. But I made him watch it with me because we were staying together. And we watched it. I ended up losing in the comp first round. It helped me a little bit. He ended up going to win the comp at this big event that we're in Acapulco in Mexico. And when we finished, he's like, oh man, I've just been going to bed, visualizing myself holding the trophy at the thing all week, and here I am. And I was like, you got more out of it than me. But isn't that like... But quite an interesting... He's I think he's like episode 3 or 4 of Good Humans podcast, way back at the start. And I'm pretty sure we talked about that story. So if when you finish this episode, you want to go back, isn't that interesting? And he's like, yeah, I've used it through my life. But funny how...
And you were saying, I heard you was talking about like, you know, just rocking up to a marathon with like 2 days prior, and, you know, just rocking up feeling as though you belong there. You're feeling as though you've done it. You're just acting like the other people that have completed the race. Actually, I was up in Byron Bay. I know Maddie Laycock and
oh, no way. Well. Oh, sick. Yeah.
And I didn't go skydiving with him, but I went skydiving a couple of weeks after I caught up with him. And in my head, I'd done it a million times, and it was the first time I was going skydiving. And when I went up, I was like, there was zero nerves, just absolute joy and like full openness to the experience. And I was like, oh, like this is like, I feel like I've done it a million times, because in my head, I'd watched all the videos that people have posted and stuff like that.
Oh, that's it's just crazy. And our mind's a very powerful thing. Like, I love this quote, and it carries me through so much of the work that I do. And so many people think like, wow, you look so confident. Like, you know, you interview these people, you get on these big stages. I'm like, the act of confidence comes before the feeling of confidence. And it's a little bit different to fake it before you make it. Like, once you start, like, and you being an actor, you can probably lean into this. Like, when you just pretend, not even pretend, you own that. I mean, I'm sure it comes with a lot of preparation, but I'm sure there's sometimes where you feel a bit underprepared. And once you start doing, you're like, oh yeah, here it is. Like, the feeling comes through the action, not through the preparation. Like, you actually have to start doing it to feel it. Does that relate to you?
100%. And like, I think Tony Robbins talks often about the physiological, you know, get yourself in that physical state. Like, I kind of have, actually, I just thought of a memory that might be kind of cool. It's a story that I don't think I've told before, which is like, I helped my mate Dacre Montgomery audition for Stranger Things, and he ended up getting the gig, and he said, why don't you come over and visit on set? And so like, I was still at drama school at the time, and I worked for my dad doing carpentry, which I know you did, and I saved up, and I flew over, and you know, I got to chill on set with him on on set of Stranger Things, and it was like, it was so, I was going from first to second year in drama school, and it was so good to just feel how casual it was. Like so often actors will put it on a pedestal, but realizing how close it is and how it's just there, it was really cool. And I remember like he was in the makeup chair getting his mullet put on, and I was in his trailer, and he was just about to get called to set, and I think I like grabbed my phone. It was next to the mirror in the trailer, and I just looked in the mirror quickly, and I was like, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna be standing in one of these trailers looking at a mirror, and it's gonna be a set that I'm gonna be working on one day." And then it was like a small thing, but then I ran out and watched him on set, and we had a bit of fun. And then when I came back home, like a bit of my meditation practice would be planting that seed of looking myself in the mirror, being like, "Cool, we're here." And then cut to a couple of years later on the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. It was like quite a big young adult show. It was like a sister show to Riverdale. And I was playing the new villain come love interest. And I was listening to The Doors on repeat and picked up my phone, which was right next to the mirror. And I was like, "Oh, fuck. Like, I'm here." It was such a wig out. Yeah.
Right, it's got goosebumps. Thank you for sharing that. It's so cool to see, that for one, like, I love that you're supporting, your mate chase his dreams without feeling jealous. I feel like that kills so many people's, quest to greatness, is realizing like, hey, if you're only happy when you achieve something, you've got one chance to be happy. If you're happy when your 5 best mates achieve something, you've got 6 chances to be happy. If you're just happy when you see anybody, like, I watch you on the show and I'm like, fuck, how good's this young Aussie guy killing it? Whereas I know some people would be like, that's me missing out because they're achieving their dreams. It's like, no. Yeah. So I love that part of that story. But I also,
which also goes to the law of attraction. Like, to speak to second, like when you're feeling celebration, you're welcoming celebration.
Yes.
In your life, when you're feeling it for someone else, you're welcoming in your life, happy for, like, yeah.
I love that. And then the second part of that is, I think, by putting yourself in, like you said, you saved that money from being a carpenter, you spent that money to go over and be on set because, he's your mate, you get the opportunity to do that. But I think, as you said, it made you not put this mega thing on, like, this acting career on a pedestal. You're like, it is just this. Like, you're still waking up, you're still breathing the same air, you're still going to work.
100.
But, it makes you not put stuff, like you said, on a pedestal, which makes it seem more achievable. It's not this distant. It's like when you imagine what a holiday destination is going to be like, and then you get there and it's completely different. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to let go to whatever it is, and I'll be there one day.
That was a cool thing, like with even listening to Tom's thing, and he was like, when the guy was like, we compete in the northern beaches, and then you compete in the state, and then you compete in Australia, and then you could possibly go to the world. And that's like just a small thing, and you're like, oh yeah, they're just like little steps. Like it's not like, I think looking at what you can do before you is so important. But I know, like, when I meet anyone, like, I feel like, and perhaps, like, I'm sure this is the reason you do the podcast, you can see and feel the greatness or the purity that lives in everyone, and you so just want that to shine. And obviously there's a lot of tools and tactics to welcome that out of people when whether it be through therapy and all that stuff, or there's leading by the example that you are, and being an example for others to give permission to be vulnerable, to give permission to speak about the things that they're going through, and then and permission to be great.
I love that way. You go.
No, I was just going to say, I think like at drama school, something that used to happen a fair bit was like some teachers would say like, prepare because it's going to be hard out there. And in my head, I'd just be like, no, no, it's not. Like, no matter what comes before me, like I've got so many different outlets of creativity. I don't feel like, as long as I'm expressing myself in some way, I'll feel good.
I just love chatting to you. I feel like one day we're going to be good mates and get to catch up, because I feel like we have such a very unique but similar view on the world. This idea of like, we put so much pressure on stuff, and it's like, and maybe it's through your mum's journey of the impermanence of life to, all these other things. You're kind of like, what's the point of like making everything so heavy? Like, He ain't heavy. I want to keep going through the chronological because that was a beautiful little sidetrack there. But let's go now to finishing high school, because I would love to understand the journey from you. And I know yours was quite unique, and you might say you're lucky, or you might say, you know what, I just manifested it and I just lent in and let it happen. So what was finishing high school? Where did you think life was going to go? Where did it go?
I think I was going to go travel, actually, work for Club Med. My brother was working in Club Med, and I was going to teach trapeze. I had it all lined up: Bali, Phuket, and Bintan Island. And my mum said, like, you kind of like this acting thing. Why don't you quickly like audition for the drama schools here in Australia and see how you go? And we actually like missed out on like the application. So I just called and said, hey, like, I missed the application, but would you mind if I come in? So I came in, and I think because I didn't particularly care, it was more of a dipping toe, and I had all these adventures lined up. That relaxation was appealing. And I got calls from these two schools saying, I didn't get into the full-time 3-year course, but we'd love you to do these short courses. And one was called The Next Step, which was with Dean Carey at ACA. And one was at NIDA doing a screen course. The screen course was for a year, and I had an incredible opportunity to work with a guy called Les Chantry, who changed my life. And then Dean Carey, he called me Christmas Eve and said, like, I was like, I want to, like, often acting schools talk about life experience before coming. And I said, look, I've got all these life experiences lined up. Like, he was like, Sam, I feel like you should do this. I feel like, and he was Hugh Jackman's coach and stuff like that. And so like, I had him as, you know, he was like, to receive those words from him meant so much. And so rather than traveling, I ended up working for my dad, and which was like, such a gift to have him always there. And like when I needed to, you know, jet off to earlier from work to go to these acting courses at night.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So you're working full-time for your dad doing carpentry, and then going and doing like a short course, like a few days a week, a few hours a week to pick up your skill. Okay, nice.
Tuesday, Thursday nights, and I'd come back at like 12 at midnight, and then I'd wake up at like 4 or 5 with him and go to work. And then Saturdays was the NIDA course. And those drives were like an hour and a half to and from Sydney, from the Central Coast, and I loved it. Like, I fucking loved it. I loved listening to Inside the Actors Studio. I loved listening to all the different journeys and the different approaches to the craft. And what was just dipping my toe in ended up being like a full deep dive into this world. And I just, like it lit me up. And, and then the following year I auditioned for the schools again, and I didn't have the opportunity to audition for WAPA, the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts, which at the time was kind of considered the hot school. When I went there, like, the teachers were just so fun and open, and, you know, not only is there acting at WAPA, there's musical theatre, there's dance, there's musicians, and they're all studying in the same campus. And so like, you're just like surrounded by people who are incredible at what they do, and are living in inspiration at the birth of their career. And so I ended up going to WAPA for 3 years and doing the 9 to 6, 5 days a week training. And that was like voice, movement and acting. So reading some of the best scripts of all time and doing them, and doing all that stuff, and emotional stuff. You know, it was kind of a lot of the stuff that my mum ended up doing, and she became a therapist. While she was learning to become a therapist, I was doing the same thing in drama school, which is, you know, expanding the domain within to then serve the text.
It's very difficult to get in there, right? Only a couple out of thousands of applicants, right?
Yeah, 18, 9 boys, 9 girls out of over 1,000 or a few. Yeah,
well, that's cool.
It's funny when I got in, my brother was like, oh, cool. And I was like, oh, he was a sportsman. And I was like, it's kind of like getting into the Institute of Sport. And he was like,
So getting into the Australian
nice.
team, the top 18 in the country, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
massive. It's like, good on
yeah.
you, that's huge.
Thanks.
So a couple of years over in WA,
Yeah.
full time, immersing yourself in it. When does the first bit? When do you finish, and what's the trajectory at that school? Is it like, all right, we're going to train you up, we're going to get you to Hollywood, like that's kind of the goal, or is it like theatre, or is it where's like your mindset going through that? Are you like, all right, I want to be a big star in Hollywood? Is that sort of the dream that most of you and your your mates at school are aiming for?
Look, it's different for each person for different reasons, like it's cool when you hear like, yeah, different for each person, and different people attract different work. I think for me, the feeling of honoring someone that actually lived on a page, that is on a page, and bringing them to life, it kind of feels like, kind of being a channel for something that needs to be expressed. And that felt pretty special to me. And so that's why I say, like, expand my vessel so I can just allow whatever is to come through. And that means working on my voice so I have the adaptability of accents and range. And same with, we did like 4 hours of yoga. So then you're very in tune with the body and able to take on whatever gestural or postural character you're welcome. And I think, it's mainly theatre training. So you're reading some of the best scripts from theatre of all time. And I think there's something about like a lot of screen acting course, you'll do scenes, which is great. And it's great to understand the structure of a scene and rip in. But doing entire plays and learning going from A to Z in one go. And when those curtains open, you're on stage and you have to see it through. That feels really great, because then when you get a script and like for a film, you understand the whole arc of a character, and you're able to like think about how can this scene serve the whole story, as opposed to how can I do something cool in this scene.
I love that. It's not about you, it's about the story, it's about the character. That's amazing. So let's talk about the end of school there. What's your first big opportunity? When does the story of Sam Corlett start on the big screens?
We graduated. We did like showcase Perth, Melbourne, Sydney. Met with a few managers here and ended up going with an incredible team at United here, who just felt so secure and nurturing of my creativity. And then we ended up doing a showcase in LA, and I had a couple like test deals where I was doing chemistry tests for a Netflix film and a chemistry thing for an Apple series. And so like arriving in LA with those ready to go was a bit appealing to people. And so I got to speak to a lot of managers and agents over there. And I ended up going with a team called 360, who similarly just felt steady. There was no like overt showmanship. Like I had people take me out to dinner, and when the check came, they'd pull out their wallet, almost showing off the $100 bills. And I was like, oh, if you think that's what attracts me to this world, you're wrong. And so I'm so grateful that all my team just have such artistic integrity. And then The Dry came about. Rob Connolly, an epic Australian director, and they said, would you fly home and test for this and do a chemistry read with Joe Klotchik, who was cast as young Eric Banner. And I came back and it just felt so organic, doing something Aussie, a little rapscallion. And a couple of days later, I got the call, in 2 weeks, you're going to start shooting in Melbourne. And I was like, holy shit. And then I did that, and that was such a cool experience. And like the 4 of us young actors, Claude Scott Mitchell, BB Betancourt and Joe Klotchik, got so close. And then a couple of weeks later, or a month or so later, I was doing auditions, and Sabrina came through. And when I was in LA, I met with the casting director, David Rappaport, on what was meant to be like a 10-minute general meeting, but we ended up having a deep D&M. And he and I just connected real deeply. And then when this came around, he was obviously a champion for me. And I was listening to Michael Hutchence, In Excess, and The Doors, and I just kind of brought that to the audition, and then got a call on Thursday. Can you be in Vancouver on Friday? And the next day I flew out, and that was so wild because that was like an international big thing, and flew business for the first time and had all those experiences. And then I arrived in Vancouver, dropped my bags off, and went straight to the table read of the first episode of season 3, and the community of that set was so beautiful. Like all the actors on Sabrina were just like, yeah, I hadn't worked a day on set and I already felt like I'd been there for years, you know?
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Different country, a whole different, culture probably to it, but then stepping straight into it sounds amazing. How do you go with, well, I want to quickly go here, remembering your lines and stuff. Like my friend Benny, like he used to be on Neighbours, so he would sit there at night when I'd stayed here, when I was in Melbourne, and would sit there reading back and forward lines, and like, you got to remember them for tomorrow, then you got to remember new ones for the next day, new ones for the next day. How do you find it? Is there any trick for you, like remembering stuff, or you
I think it's just like
story?
The story, yeah, really understanding what's
and
underneath.
The character.
Yeah, and understanding their motivations helps with understanding the lines, because then like you connect it to an emotional place within you. So, but again, it's like, like how do you approach a wave when the lip's just about to, like you've done it that many times that you just kind of, it's quite intuitive. And then how do you approach a scene? Often there's like a bit of a float like a butterfly, and then a shift happens in the scene, and there's the sting like a bee. And so like understanding structure, it's very musical. I find often dialogue. But yeah, I sometimes record the other person's lines on my phone, and I'll walk around the streets like I'm on a phone call and just be chatting to myself. That's cool.
What about like improvising throughout scenes? Because I listened to Green Lights the other day, Matthew McConaughey's book, which I'm sure you've listened to and read. Phenomenal. The way that he kind of described it's like I become the character, and then what comes out in that scene, like whether it's on the script or not, if I believe that's what that character would say in that moment, quite often the directors will want to go with it anyway. Is that something that you've had throughout your experience, or is that kind of as you progress as an actor, you get a bit more trust in your, your sense of the character as well as obviously the writer?
Yeah, I usually form a really close relationship with the writer early on, and we'll jam ideas before coming on set. Like with a lot of the Netflix productions that I've done, like Vikings and Territory, which is something we haven't chatted about.
We're going to get there.
That's coming. I spoke really closely with Jeb Stewart and Timothy Lee on those respective projects. And, if I had any ideas, I'd spitball it there. And then on the day, yeah, definitely there was an allowance for improvisation, but you really got to have like a real strong understanding of the story and not just your character, like you might have sick ideas that will seem cool, but it actually doesn't serve the entirety of the story. And so I think improvisers it's so good when you have that, understanding.
Yeah. No, it's so cool to just try and understand the acting world, because I find it quite interesting. At the end of the day, like all of us are actors. The way that you hang out with your partner is different to the way that you hang out with someone that you first met, is different to a job interview, is different. So like we all are technically acting different versions of ourselves. And then like the voice you have in yourself when you're sitting at home in a hotel room by yourself is different to the way that you are with your partner. Like we're all kind of actors, but you just kind of expand that range to different people.
100%.
Sabrina goes really well for you. Things are flowing. If I recall correctly, you recorded like back-to-back seasons and did like 11 months straight in Canada. How old were you then, and what was that like, spending that much time overseas and jumping straight into such a big show?
Yeah, I would have just turned like 22. Yeah, 22. It was sick, man. Like I think it had been going so well, that show, and to join it with that company and that cast, it was such a gift. And Roberto, our showrunner, was like so intelligent and so fantastic at creating these epic worlds. Yeah, I just had a blast. I think like also it was like straight out of drama school, and so like I had this like virility in me that I wanted to keep on going, and it was like it's funny starting to understand, where you fit in the structure of things and how can I serve beyond what they expect of me, and that's what I attempted to do.
Get to go put everything you've just learned to the test and like you trial it out in real time on a big show.
Yeah, and it was cool like having like Shakespeare in my back pocket and all that stuff. So because he kind of wrote the characters quite like Shakespearean in a way.
Sick.
And so there was a lot that I could draw from.
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's fast forward now. Where does Vikings come into the picture? Because I'm sure most people listening to this would know you through Vikings. I mean, I've got to go back and watch Sabrina, as I said at the start. I'd rather be honest to you than blow smoke up your ass and say that I've been a super fan for a long time, but I am now. So yeah, when did Vikings come into play? Because being the main lead role in a mega Netflix and a follow-on from an extremely successful show, Vikings. When did Vikings Valhalla come into your orbit?
That was just an audition that came through, and I read it, and I used to watch the original show with my dad growing up, and straight away I was like, I know this world, I know this character, I know what I could do with it. And so I ended up getting Richard Coyle, who played Blackwood in Sabrina, and he's like a master of the craft in terms of acting. He's on the West End. He just did To Kill a Mockingbird, and he's with Ian McKellen doing Shakespeare at the moment on the West End in like a big theatre production in London.
Yeah, wow.
And he helped me out, and I kind of intentionally picked him because I wanted pressure to like be at a good level. And we just jammed the scene a couple of times, had a bit of a play and sent it off, and heard straight away, the producers really liked your tape. And I was like, oh, cool. And then holiday break came, and so like I kind of forgot about it. And then early January, I was flying back to Vancouver to continue Sabrina, and they said, hey, can you find time out from your schedule to fly over to Ireland to do a chemistry read with the girl that may play your sister and the guy that might play your best mate? And I was like, I'm sure we could figure something out. And
that's usually a pretty good sign that like they want you. It's just double checking that it's going to work. Fuck, that must have been exciting.
It was, and I don't know why I had such confidence, but I was like actually kind of hesitant. I was like, is this where I want to put my, because sometimes when you sign onto a series, it's like 7 years it can go up to. And so I was like, far out, is this where I want to spend my 20s with this project? And then with that slight hesitancy, the showrunner said, well, let's have a Zoom. And so the showrunner was Jeb Stewart, who wrote Die Hard and The Fugitive, and he's like all time. And what was kind of funny though, like I often find like the people who are the most successful are really, really in touch with themselves. And we just had a really personal conversation. We didn't speak about how cool it would be, or I spoke about my mum, he spoke about his partner, who had both had illnesses, and we spoke about what we wanted to say as artists in this world, and what we could use the Trojan horse of Vikings being such a genre epic that would attract certain different crowds, and what we could, like what we could share with them, and knowing his sensibilities, I was like, oh wow. And then he became like a bit of a mentor, and like really took on all my ideas, allowed me freedom to design my tattoos, rewrite scenes, to pitch ideas for overarching storylines. He was just such a legend to be able to work with. And so that ensued that journey, which then became Ireland and gaining a fair bit of weight to go be a Viking.
Yeah, wow. How is that? Like trying to get into character. Like, was your beard real? Do you grow like a nice little scruffy beard?
I grew a bit, and then they filled in the rest. I couldn't.
That's I can't either. Anyone who can't see me, I mean, you can see me right now. I get like this scruff, but it doesn't really grow anywhere else.
It's better than mine. Better than mine.
Oh, so good. And then what'd you say? You had to put on some weight for it as well.
Yeah,
what'd you have to get to?
I was around 82 for Sabrina, or 80, which is probably around where my body naturally sits. But I climbed up to like 95 for Vikings, and then throughout the shooting,
the winter.
To survive the winter and just like kind of look a bit older. I was 23, and I just kind of I wanted to feel the hardness. So like that involved like waking up early for sea swims in the Irish Sea and swimming 7Ks in the morning, and then training hard in the afternoon with weights, and just like trying to get into like a bit of that warrior mentality.
Because that's your character. Exactly. That's what I was about to say. Your character's a guy who can, sail the seas better than anyone, who can grit out the gnarliest fights. And don't spoil it for me. I'm only halfway through season 1. But yeah, I'm just so impressed with just your character. Like I said, I binge watched it yesterday, and it's just like this essence and presence about you in that show that goes beyond like just a character. I don't know. It just feels like it's you. I mean, I've only watched like a few episodes of it, but it's you're so brilliant in it.
Thank you.
I want to talk about on set, how you protect your energy, because I just want to try and bring some relatabilities to your career with what other people do. But I know for you, there's like massive days of filming, different scenes, retake. Like, how do you protect your energy in between? Because everyone probably wants a piece of you and to be talking, but you need to like be on for these moments of the day. So yeah, what sort of practices do you have for self-care to maintain, being able to be on when you have to be on?
Well, yeah, the whole lot really. Like, I exhausted myself on that. I wish I took care of my sleep a lot more. But in the morning, the sea swim, the cold exposure, the cold plunge, meditation, yoga, movement, that was really essential. In the 3rd season of Vikings, I welcomed a coach who was a kinesiologist as well as an acting coach. And we had a couple of techniques to kind of just, like, a lot of it was like being able to protect yourself between cut and action, as opposed to action and cut. Because action and cut, that's what you've worked for. That's what you feel. Like when the perfect wave comes, you know what to do. Yeah. But when you're waiting, how do you remain in a sense of centered self? And so, there would be meditation, there would be music. These little earphones came in handy when I bought them when I was shooting, and it's dependent on the scene. So sometimes the scene calls for emotion, an emotional response, anger, all sorts, and sometimes it's like just being a mate. And so, just kind of depending on the scene, I'll just try to do what I can do to remain in that kind of frequency. And so, like, it would be for a lot of the mate scenes, it's just chatting and having a yarn, and so that it feels seamless going from Sam to Leif back to or it feels seamless going from sitting waiting for action to be called to action happening, and then that's kind of what you want. So and like with He Ain't Heavy, I kind of stayed in character almost all day, and I ritualized the brackets of each day through like Palo Santo and sage and stuff like that, and listening to
we're just so similar. I just like, there's so many things that people probably don't even know the words that you're saying, but I'm like, I've got that in my bathroom. I use that every day to cleanse the energy. It's it's so cool, like this, a holistic and like centered mindset that I feel like you have. And in the industry you're in, you could so easily slip and go the other way of like superstar, lead actor of these big shows, but it just seems like you're so centered and present and dedicated to the art, not to the success that's being brought through your art. I just want to quickly touch on one scene. We spoke about this quickly before we started recording, but I'm up to like episode 6, and episode 3, I think, is the bridge. You're a Central Coast boy. Do you surf? You told me off air. You said you surf a little bit, but there's a scene where you guys carve out wood and use them as basically surfboards to paddle down to take over this bridge.
Yeah.
How was that? Did you have to teach everyone how to paddle on a board?
Yeah, I think the showrunner actually took it from. I think because he knew that I did.
Because everyone else is paddling like the big wide arms. I was like, which one's Sam? Because I bet you he's not paddling like that.
Yeah, no, I did have to teach a little bit. And then when that was like freezing cold water.
I was about to say it must be so cold.
It was probably like 4 or 5 degrees and we were in it all night.
And you're in all your gear, probably like in your costume. Just
we had wetties underneath, but it was like they had to cut it because so the water would just get in. It was like I'm not sure, but and then we had to rotate the surfboards, and so I was helping people rotate the boards and pushing them back. And it was pretty funny.
That's so good. And then I'm going to move from Vikings now because I know we don't have too much longer, and I still really want to touch on Territory and He Ain't Heavy. Actually, I'm going to leave Vikings now because I'm going to watch the next 2 seasons, and maybe we can catch up in a year or something and talk about what else we've been up to, because I feel like we can continue chatting for hours. So let's talk about what comes after Vikings, because quite often we become a face of a mega show, and it can be very hard to break free from it and play another character that people can trust that you can pull it off. As you said, you had that fear, or maybe I'm going to be in this Vikings show for 7 years, and that's me. It can kind of pigeonhole a career just from the outside looking in at acting. What was next? Territory, He Ain't Heavy, or was there something in between?
Well, I got another pretty cool story actually.
Tell me.
Again, I haven't shared much at all. Where I was up in Byron in between seasons and hanging out there, and a mate of mine said, I got a lunch set up for you. I want you meet someone here at Byron. I think it was Elements. No, it wasn't Elements. It was another place. Anyway, he goes, just meet here for lunch. No, I rocked up and it was Matt Damon. And ended up having a sick chat with him about his career and talking about, my dreams, aspirations. And then I brought up my fear of, I just don't want to be, I was saying, I just don't want to be seen as that Viking guy, I don't want to be trapped in that kind of idea. And he just fully just burst the bubble and he goes, just don't play another Norse explorer. It's pretty easy. It was so good because he would have had those, fears when he was a kid, but he was just so simple with just don't play another Viking. You swear.
Very frank. That's it. Because he spends a lot of time in Byron. He's best mates with Chris Hemsworth, who's down there. My sister and her husband Fisher are good mates with them and spent a bit of time with them over the years. So I've heard they're good people. But yeah, isn't that great? Those little lessons that you can get. You build up this whole thing in your head, and just like you said, it's like a balloon bursting and poof, it's gone. It's
exactly.
That's great. So when did the next opportunity pop up after Vikings, or was it still in the mix? You're auditioning while in Vikings for other stuff as well?
Here and there, and there was things that came close that would have been really great business moves, but didn't feel in alignment with my heart. I really appreciate the superhero universe, and I spoke to a director about one of those films, but it didn't end up going my way, and I trusted that it just wasn't the right time and the right character for me to go into that universe. And then
Spider-Man.
No, I can't say.
You'd be a good Spider-Man. You can't say that. I reckon you'd be a good Spider-Man. Sorry, Tom Holland.
But then, and a couple other things. But I received the script He Ain't Heavy from David Vincent Smith, and it was an independent, really real. I think the actors that I look up to really, really toe the line of commercial and you know, and
Uh,
indie, you know, doing
Mm.
passion projects and stuff that is for a bit more of the general population. And those people would be like Heath Ledger, River Phoenix when he.
Well, it's like Matthew McConaughey. Listening to Green Lights, it sounds in
Mm,
weird ways like a little bit parallel. That he like, you know, had his big moments and he did the rom-coms for a while and he had all these big opportunities and millions of dollar offers. And he's just like, nah, I'm going this way. And then, you know, we get Dallas Buyers Club and all these other movies that are, you know, some of the best of all time.
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty. It was very courageous of him, and I think I wanted to do something that really was like a soulful thing. And so when David Vincent Smith sent me the script for He Ain't Heavy, I saw words verbatim that I'd heard in my life, experiences that I'd encountered, and people that I knew. You know, and doing something Australian using my own voice, it felt so beautiful, and it was such an honor to shed light on this topic. And then when I wrapped that, I went and traveled the Ments for a while.
I heard about this story.
Yeah, spent some time with the Indigenous folks in the forest, and that was really special. I could go on for ages on that.
What led you to do that? And tell me about that experience quickly.
Yeah, it's funny because I read Green Lights afterwards, like later, much later, but I saw parallels. I was like, I've been traveling these last 5 years, going to, you know, I'll be in LA promoting Vikings and staying there and feeling like I'm literally and figuratively running on a treadmill, you know, being where I should be, quote unquote, but not necessarily where I feel the most fulfilled. And so when I was shooting He Ain't Heavy, I did like a little goal setting workshop with some of my mates that I met there. And one of the things was to travel for the sake of it, travel for my own soul. And so I just Googled Indigenous tribes living throughout Indonesia. And I think doing Vikings, you know, knowing they were the kind of Indigenous tribe of Scandinavia, like their harmony with nature was so beautiful. And I wanted to see that and feel that in life. And so I found the tribe in Subaru in the Mentawai, and I Googled people who had been there, and journalists had referenced this one tour guide that you had to connect to on Facebook who was from there. I was very trusting, like in hindsight, like it was, maybe naive, but
the universe will take you on its way.
That's it. I trusted it. And my friend was traveling Thailand at the time, my childhood, like best mate from when we were like 8 years old. And I said, hey, do you want to meet me in South Sumatra and go spend some time with these people? And so he came along and got to witness some really incredible ceremonies, and just witnessing the way these people lived in such harmony with nature and with life. It was so beautiful. Then I stayed in Bali for a while, met a beautiful family that we'll talk about it next time. I'm going to make a film about this incredible family. And then Territory came along, which is this epic 6-part Netflix series.
Coming out October 24th, a few days after this episode comes out. Hence why we're chatting out now. You've got a big week coming up, so thanks for fitting me into your, I'm sure, very hectic schedule.
No, mate, it's my pleasure. But yeah, seeing that script, seeing that Greg McLean, who directed Wolf Creek, was going to be directing. Simon Duggan, who shot Great Gatsby and Furiosa, the DOP, the director of photography, he was shooting this, and what an honor to be captured by someone who's such a legend. And the content of the script, I'd never read it, an Aussie script that was so for Australians. You know, oftentimes we have scripts that internationalize itself to try to appeal to overseas, but in doing that, it kind of waters down what's real for us. And this felt so real for me and my mates. And I got some early screeners and I've been watching it with my mates, and it's been like so cool just feeling their reactions and seeing their reactions. And he's like, I really played kind of the youth of Australia. His name's Marshall Lawson, and he doesn't want anything to do with the farm, the massive cattle farm. it's a big family. It's like Yellowstone in Australia kind of thing.
Sick.
But so Australian that it's nothing like Yellowstone.
I love when shows like literally lean into the Australian culture. Like what comes to mind is like Boy Who Swallows the Universe. Like when I watched that, it's very like they lent into the Aussie-ness of it, which made it great.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, I think Netflix in Australia is doing a really good job of that at the moment.
Yeah.
Being unapologetically us, and that's what this is.
Sick.
I'm really looking forward to people being able to see this one.
Mate, I can't wait. So yeah, that comes out October 24th. October 17th is He Ain't Heavy. So you're going to be everywhere at the moment. I'm sure after this podcast, people are going to be keen. I just want to touch on one thing. This is a random thought that I had and something that I always randomly think about. When you enter like the mental eyes, you know, like these people are still right now living that life. Do you ever like when you're on a red carpet or like having a chat like this, living this big life? This is my weird way of thinking because I've traveled the world a lot with my surfing. I stop and think like those people are still just doing that over there. Like as much as I get overwhelmed with so much going on, I'm like, this is life just as much as that is life. And for me, that kind of settles the anxiety of having to do. It's like, we can just be.
Yes, man. Oh, you couldn't have articulated it better. I think about it often, and I did feel like the time there seemed to seep into infinity, you know. And I do feel strange, especially like there's times where like we're talking about He Ain't Heavy, and like there's a premiere where you might want to put on a suit, but it's not just like not even thinking about the mental tower, but thinking about people that were in my character's position that are struggling with methamphetamine and stuff like that. Like, and I'm just wearing a suit coming to like it does feel funny, but like also sometimes these are things I need to lean in. I as an Australian with the tall poppy things, I'm learning to lean into it in order to promote the things that I'm proud of.
Yeah,
like and do the thing like kind of be a bit more public facing, which it's like the antithesis of what an Aussie male is taught to do. And I'm trying to do it as in touch with my integrity and honesty as possible.
Which I think you are, and I think that was what we started this conversation. The first thing that you spoke at the beginning of this conversation with you giving me, a bit of props about this idea of reframing what positive masculinity is, what, it means to be a young, successful Australian. Like, you don't have to be cocky. Like, it's just like this tightrope that we walk. And I think breaking down that barrier and being like, be proud of your successes. Like, if not you, then who? And I think I just want to quickly touch on this because I know for actors, one of the hardest things is, rejection. It happens time and time and time again. And I know you would have had plenty, but you've also had some great things come up. But I love this quote that you share, that the archer's hands are slowly slipping. Can you talk about that just real quickly and maybe use it as a bit of advice for any young actors, aspiring actors who, are auditioning and not getting the role, getting really put down on themselves. And maybe we can tie it into what we touched on earlier, this idea that, hey, if you're happy when your mate gets a role, amazing. It's going to draw it to you rather than being like, oh, I would have been way better than him in that role. And I know people would get stuck in that mindset, but it seems like you really don't. I think you understand kind of where I was going with that question.
I suppose, 100%. I think we all have, let me just...
No, take your time. Gather your thoughts.
I think the most powerful thing you can offer is your unique expression. And I think when you're comparing and contrasting and attempting to please producers or whatever your industry is, you're taking away from your intuitive expression. When I say like the archer's hand is slipping, I often find when setbacks come, it's actually just deepening your potential, like an archer pulling back the bow and deepening it and refining your target in a more specific way. Like what's for you won't go by you, and knowing that the archer's hands will slowly slip at one point and
shoot you to where you want to be.
And shoot you to exactly where you're meant to be. And so with trust in that, you can continue to be you rather than trying to be anyone else.
It's so beautifully put. And I think that's We're very close to where we're going to end this, but mate, I've had such a beautiful time getting to know your story, getting to pick your brains. I understand it is a bit of a privilege. I looked around. There's only two podcast episodes without. Have you done more than two? I just couldn't find any of the other ones.
I listen to podcasts, and I like the long form and being able to chat a bit more. But no, I've kept it pretty on the DL.
Well, thank you so much, as I said, for giving me the opportunity. You. I feel like we have in our own weird little ways, a very similar view on the world, but also, I got to travel the world with my career with surfing. You're traveling the world with your career in acting and bringing your art to the world, which is just so beautiful. I do finish Good Humans podcast with the same question for everyone. So, what does being a good human mean to Sam Corlett?
That's a good question.
Everybody's answered differently, so there's no right or wrong.
Yeah. What's being a good human mean to Sam Corlett? I think that kind of seeking to understand first rather than being understood. I think celebrating your mates.
Right. That's I haven't heard that before. Seeking to understand rather than be understood. It reminds me of a quote from a guy Ben Crow talks about this idea of be interested, not interesting.
Yeah. I mean that's I think also we can go on another tangent. We could talk for ages, but Jung has a really beautiful thing, that which triggers us in someone else is really something that in ourselves that we're not yet to accept. And that which we admire in someone else is our true self yearning to be expressed.
Ooh, that's so beautifully put. Maybe I will leave it. It reminds me a lot of this book, The Mountain Is You by Brianna Weiss, this idea that once we start looking at yourself, have you read it or heard of it?
No.
It's a great book. It's called The Mountain Is You, and it's this idea of when we're looking to change everything around us, what we really need to change is the mountain that we have inside ourselves of overcoming those self-doubt, that self-fear, that, self-judgment, which is a really beautiful way to end this conversation. But mate, as I said, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Hopefully we can cross paths in person somewhere in the world in the coming, hopefully months, or at least in the coming year or two. Would very highly recommend everyone go watch Vikings Valhalla if you haven't already. I'm going to get stuck into Sabrina and Territory next week, and He Ain't Heavy in a cinema near me, hopefully soon. But mate, just want to say big thank you. Congratulations on the career and good luck with the next chapter, because I'm going to be a mad fan. I'm sure plenty of people listening right now will be as well.
Cheers, Cooper. Appreciate it, mate.